Look at how prompt you all are. I do love beginning things with a 0 on the clock. How wonderful. Welcome, everybody. My name is Chris Holton-Jablonski. It is my great joy and my deep honor to serve the wonderful people of this wonderful place, along with my colleague, Reverend Martha Durkee Newman, and even more importantly, so many other wonderful volunteers pouring themselves into this place. Many of you are here right now. I want to begin and end our time together with a lot of gratitude. So first off, I invite you all to have a deep breath in and let it out. My wife is wonderful and very wise, and she likes to say, you can pretend to care, but you can't pretend to show up. So I'm grateful for all of you shower-uppers for coming today. Also deeply grateful for our team here, for Gina especially, and Charlie, who's done so much work to put this together, and all of our team. If you want to just raise your hand. Really incredible. They've really gone above and beyond for a very long time, and you'll hear a little bit about our journey together. And for all of our presenting organizations, I have the wonderful joy of being connected to each of them in very different ways, and I know these are really great places, full of really great people. And so these stories that we're about to hear, also I think many of you who are just in the beginning of this kind of reckoning in your own congregations, maybe some of you are way far down the line and you're about to dedicate all sorts of stuff and you have all sorts of very highly evolved analysis, and we are very grateful for that. We come together in so many different places, and there's something powerful and beautiful in sharing these stories that you're about to hear. And especially, I'm excited for all that comes next after that. That's a perfect reminder. Please silence your cell phones. But the last couple gratitudes are also for our history. So I want to give thanks for all of our ancestors here in these congregations, for all their many mistakes they've made and all we are learning as we grapple with those mistakes. And especially, and I'll invite you to have another deep breath in for this one and let it out. I want to give the deepest gratitude, especially today, for all of the enslaved folks. May this day, may all that transpires here be acceptable in their sight. We're grateful for their lives, for their creativity, for their joys, for their loves, and for this opportunity here and now together. Welcome, everybody, and amen. Almost as important, probably you found the bathrooms, but there's 2 right through these doors. There's all of our incredible food. Please feel free to take care of yourselves. Lots of space to stand up and walk around if you need. Lots of more food and drink, and we're so grateful that you're all here. So we will dive right in, I believe. I will look to somebody else who knows better, but yeah, perfect. Yeah, hop in.
Good morning. I'm Reverend Mary Margaret Earle. I'm the Executive Director and Senior Minister of the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry, and I first want to say I love Belmont's definition of a continental breakfast. This is like a full-on brunch. Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Chris Jablonski. I'm very proud that the way that we are connected to him is that he is the chair of the board of the urban ministry. A busy, busy fellow. Thank you. And I am very proud to be here with my colleague and also a member of the board of directors of the urban ministry, Thomas Plant, who will be speaking. Thomas's profession is as a public health. He's in public health, serving the community. In his other time, he's an historian who has expertise in the history of First Church Roxbury, of Roxbury itself, of the urban ministry, and he is also a founding member of our history committee, which is guiding our research, and he'll be speaking in just a moment. So many of you, I wanted to tell you a little of the context of the urban ministry. We have many folks from some of our member congregations who know us to varying degrees, but let me just explain who we are a bit so you understand the research that we have been doing. We are a 200-year-old faith-based nonprofit founded by a Unitarian minister named Reverend Joseph Tuckerman. We've been doing justice work in Boston for all those years. But previously, we were on Arlington Street in downtown Boston. And in 1976, one of our member congregations decided to fold, and that was First Church Roxbury. And First Church Roxbury had been one of the early Puritan congregations founded in the 1630s, had worshiped on this piece of land in Roxbury continuously from the 1630s until 1976, when, because of white flight from the neighborhood of Roxbury, that congregation had really dwindled and decided to fold. And they bequeathed to the urban ministry their property. And up to that point, the urban ministry had sometimes inherited church buildings and sold them to fund its programs, but in this case kept it and eventually moved our operations fully there. But when we inherited that congregation, that history of First Church Roxbury essentially became grafted onto our history, right? So we claim that history. It wasn't our congregation per se, but we inherited the buildings and the history, so therefore we will own it. In 2020, George Floyd was killed, and out of that, many organizations made statements. Some have held true to them, some not. The Urban Ministries Board of Directors came out with a statement called We Speak Now and made commitments, and those commitments still guide us. In some ways, they're kind of like our Declaration of Independence, right? We adhere to them and we call ourselves back to those commitments. And one of the commitments was to interrogate the history of First Church Roxbury and interrogate the history of enslavement. And so that is the piece of the statement that is illustrated in what we're doing today. We were very fortunate to learn about some research that had been done for the Shirley Eustace House about enslavement by a Harvard graduate student named Abid Alibai. And so the urban ministry partnered with the Roxbury Historical Society. I had zero idea of any of this history, no idea what this would look like at all. But we partnered with the Roxbury Historical Society, including Byron Rushing, and engaged Abid Alibai to start to research the history from its founding through the Revolutionary War. And he was able to unearth the names of about 80-some enslaved people who are connected to First Church. And he did this report, which then propelled the next phase, which was convening a history committee that has guided us forward since then. And Thomas Plant is going to take it from there to talk about what else our work is uncovering. So Thomas.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here today to talk about the enslavement project at First Church in Roxbury by the Unitarian Universalist Urban Ministry. And I want to thank, this would not have happened without the support of the board under Carla Baer and now under Chris Yabonsky. I'm so glad to be that we're moving forward with being charged, the History Committee being charged to look into further descendants of those enslaved, both African and also indigenous people at First Church in Roxbury. And you see here, one of the things that we started to do was, as a history committee, we needed to have expertise to look into this history, and we decided in November of '24 to hire Mary Snyder, who had worked at the Whitney Plantation and had done a lot of wonderful articles on the enslavement of people there at the Whitney Plantation at Georgetown, and now was a PhD student at BU. And we also hired Mika Kane, who had done a lot of work on the industrial work of Africans in Columbus, Ohio area, and now is a graduate student at MIT. They led a great search into those who were enslaved here in Roxbury, particularly by members of the Roxbury congregation at First Church. They found, we see some of the students here. Okay, there's the church. Under Mika Kane, we organized 8 workshops. We wanted the students in understanding their place in the world, who they are, to understand how they can search their own families, genealogic history, maybe some of the descendants of those Africans in First Church in Roxbury, but we wanted them to have the skills involved in genealogic research on their families. And we work with American ancestors, and they got to tour. These workshops were done by professional people. They learned how to do some of the searches, and this will continue as we have other meetings to look into their own history of their families, because African Americans, there's a cutoff. You get past your great-grandparent, and then nobody knows a lot because of the enslavement. Myself, my family was enslaved by William Plant in Georgia. That's how we got that last name. And so they may find out different areas of their own history, but we wanted them to have those kind of skills so they can tell their stories and understand the history at First Church in Roxbury. So it's not all about very rich white people on the walls and plaques, but also about the people who served and were forgotten, were not visible, were not talked about. We're going to change that as we early on put in a proposal for the Harvard Reparative Grant, and we got the $25,000 to allow us to hire Mary Snyder and Mickey Kane, and we are now have traced one family who was a biracial family who weren't married in the church because they couldn't be married because one was black, one was white, and they had to get Cotton Mather to marry them in Boston. And then they traveled from New York to New Jersey, to the Ohio Valley, to Indiana, out to Kansas, out to Utah, and then up into Portland, Oregon. Mary Snyder has traced them, and that history we do know. But there's so many other histories that we don't know, and we still have a lot of work to do. And this history committee is now planning further descendant looking into the history of those descendants, and we've been charged by the board to have a commemoration of those people who were enslaved in Roxbury, permanently installed in the church or on the church grounds, but it will happen. And as you see here, some of the members of the committee are looking around the church to see where that's possible, where those people will be commemorated. We will have the ceremony in the First Church Meeting House. And I, for one, think that, there's so many plaques in there. There's going to be a space over my dead body. There's going to be a space for all those who were forgotten, who weren't visibly talked about, but contributed to the success of those members in First Church in Roxbury. So I'm glad we're here talking about this today, and thank you.
Thank you, guys. I realized I forgot to say 2 things. I was so excited to see all of you and get it going. we're going to be hearing, just as hopefully you have in your agenda, we're going to be hearing from each of these organizations for about 10 minutes each, and then we're going to have time for a question and answer for everybody all together. But all of these groups are still here, and we're human people who want to talk to other people. So please do come up and ask any questions of those folks. This is the intent to plant some seeds. But yeah, so we'll have questions at the very end.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I've got everything just written out because I know that I will go over 10 minutes or otherwise. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Gina Carloni, and I've been chairing the First Church in Belmont Legacy of Slavery project since its inception 3 years ago. And I'm so very grateful to be here with all of you today, to be a part of this UU Reparations Summit, and to be engaging in this important and necessary work as we share with each other, learn from each other, and work toward justice and healing together. I think it's important to begin by saying something about who we are as a faith community. First Church is a welcoming Unitarian Universalist congregation. As Unitarian Universalists, we don't have a creed or a fixed doctrine that unites us. Instead, members of our community are connected by a set of shared values. These values help inform how we live our lives and interact with the world around us. They're values that call us to affirm the dignity of each and every human being, to work actively to promote justice and equity and dismantle racism and oppression, and to encourage us to be truth seekers. And it is with these values guiding the way that we have begun to confront our own history as a church with the legacy of slavery in Cuba. Our Legacy of Slavery project began in 2023 when our church's parish board called for the creation of a working group with 3 principal goals. The first, to explore and develop an understanding of our church's ties to slavery during the 19th century through the substantial donations of the Atkins family. Here on the right, you can see images of our benefactors from the Atkins family, the sugar magnate Edwin Farnsworth Atkins and his wife Catherine Risley Atkins. The second goal of the project, to research other organizations with legacies of slavery, for example, churches, schools, and universities, in order to understand how they have been addressing their historical ties to the institution of slavery, and what formal steps they may be considering or taking in response. And the third goal for our working group is to share what we learn with the congregation to promote awareness and inclusion in this process and to ensure congregational participation in any recommendations that emerge from this work. So this is what we know as of now about First Church's relationship to the Atkins family. Edwin Atkins donated nearly 1/5 of the funds to build our current sanctuary building, which was completed in 1890. At that time, that was $5,000 out of the total $26,000. The extraordinary stained glass window in our sanctuary, designed by the renowned artist Louis Comfort Tiffany, is the artistic centerpiece of the church and was also donated by Edwin. The window memorializes his father, Elisha Atkins, who had started the family's sugar business in Cuba in 1838. Edwin and Catherine Atkins were also highly respected members of society, both in the Belmont community and within our congregation. They were seen as lay leaders of the church, and we know that Edwin served on the church's parish board for decades, including many years as its president. In the late 1920s, following Edwin's death in 1926, Catherine made another major gift to the congregation, our magnificent Casavant Frères organ, which is still in use today. And during the difficult years of the Great Depression, Catherine helped keep the church financially afloat by covering the church's sometimes hefty annual deficits. So, where did all this money come from? The Atkins family fortune was initially made in the sugar trade with Cuba and later through sugarcane production on the island. In 1881, Edwin Atkins' business partner, Joaquin de la Torriente, took possession of the Soledad plantation in the province of Cienfuegos. The property deed listed 177 patrocinados, enslaved Africans working toward buying their freedom, who were part of that transaction. Then, in 1884, Edwin took over ownership from De La Torriente, including the Soledad plantation and its 95 remaining patrocinados, making Edwin officially an owner of enslaved individuals from 1884 to 1888, at which time the institution of slavery was abolished in Cuba. But they continued to work on those plantations. The plantation also relied on the cheap labor of Chinese workers known as coolies. They were formerly indentured workers who had been victims of human trafficking, and they were subjected to conditions of similar cruelty to those imposed on enslaved Africans. The photos to the right from Edwin Atkins's own book, 60 Years in Cuba, depict formerly enslaved workers, as well as the living quarters of Chinese workers and enslaved Africans on the Soledad plantation. And that's in those two bottom photos are the year that, that he took over the plantation. So much exploitation, so much misery, and so much injustice. And by the 1920s, a time when no other country in the world exported more sugar than Cuba, the Atkins family had come to control 1/8 of Cuba's sugar production. Yeah. As part of our work for the Legacy of Slavery Project, we've been researching other churches, universities, and cities that are also confronting their legacies of slavery and have been in contact with many of them. We've begun conversations with Harvard and hope that there will be an opportunity to collaborate with them because Edwin Atkins was also one of the major donors that appears in their Legacy of Slavery report. We've also connected with organizations focused on reparations, as well as Cuba-related organizations, and with a number of historians, particularly those working on issues of race, the history of sugar, and slavery in Cuba. We also have had the great fortune to be able to work with the talented educator, Dr. Sophia Boyer, who we'll be hearing from later this morning. What we have learned a great deal over these last few years, and we are continuing to learn more all the time. We now know that many organizations with histories similar to ours are actively researching and officially acknowledging those histories. They are naming the people that were enslaved, creating memorials to them, and searching for descendants. They're also developing reparations programs in collaboration with descendants who continue to live with the harms caused by the institution of slavery and structural racism. Another important part of our work has been sharing what we are learning, especially with our own community. Today's summit is our 20th event. We've offered events on a variety of topics. Thank you. Thank you. To raise awareness about this part of our church's history, including programs about the institution of slavery, about Cuban history and culture, and about reparations. One of the most moving events was a worship service with Cuban music, during which 4 Cuban members and friends of our congregation read aloud the names of the enslaved men and women of Soledad. To make information about our project more accessible to our community, we've also installed 6 large informational panels with photographs that talk about this history, about the Atkins family and the lives of the patrocinados and Chinese laborers at Soledad. During our break or at the end of the summit, I hope you'll take the opportunity to look at them. They're located just outside in our upper gathering hall. We've recently created a web page about the project, and that site will continue to grow as we add more information. We're excited that this spring we have 5 additional events planned, including one being led by Dr. Boyer, which will bring our community together to begin shaping a preliminary working definition of reparations for First Church. I'd like to point out this document that you see here on the right. This photo was taken by Orlando Garcia, a Cuban historian and now friend in the Cienfuegos Provincial Historical Archives in Cuba. What you are seeing is a photo of the original 1881 deed that shows the names of 177 patrocinados that were part of the property acquired along with the Soledad plantation. Reparations work is long-term work. It requires research, understanding, collaboration, planning, financial resources, time, and commitment. We are on the road to repair. We're building momentum, and we continue to move forward. Our congregations with the larger church community about reparative work are just beginning, but we hope that recommendations for how to move forward will include publicly acknowledging the harm caused by our benefactors and expressing our sincere regret, the creation of a memorial that honors the lives of those who were enslaved, designing permanent installations that tell the story of our church's legacy of slavery clearly and truthfully, because the ones we have out there are just temporary. And then there is the community of Pepitote, Cuba, the present-day name for Soledad, a town where we know there are descendants. The photos that you see here were taken recently in Pepitote. As we work toward the creation and implementation of a reparations plan, we will do that in collaboration with our descendant community, which is essential in order to help repair the harms of the past and build a bridge between our communities that is based upon the UU principles that we espouse. Thank you.
Is that going to work okay? First, let me explain that Gloria Korsman and I composed this speech, but I have no technical skills. So the best way to divide up the work here was for me to not touch that machine. In 1906, Stephen Pascal Sharples transcribed and published the colonial records of the first parish in Cambridge. The index of names includes lists of indigenous people and people of African descent. In most cases, the records indicate that they were enslaved by first parish members. Google scanned this book in 2007, making these facts impossible to ignore. In 2010, Reverend Fred Small initiated the transformation team to facilitate the congregation's journey toward becoming a multiracial, multicultural, justice-making congregation. In 2012, First Parish began telling our complex history of enslavement in an historical display at the front of our building. The display includes information about Sicily, who was enslaved by our minister, William Brattle, and died in 1714 in a measles epidemic. Our then Director of Religious Education, Mandy Neff, created lessons to teach our children and youth about Sicily and her enslavement. In 2013, parishioner David Kidder of First Church in Cambridge, UCC, began researching his congregation's history of enslavement and identified 36 persons, 33 Africans and 3 indigenous persons, enslaved by church members and clergy between 1698 and 1783. Their minister, Dan Smith, then led the congregation in an intensive examination of this history of enslavement, its impacts, and legacy, compiling a large body of information and compelling stories. You can access this resource on the First Church website. Their history of slavery is our history of slavery. Harvard University's history of slavery is also our history. All colonial communities and institutions benefited from stolen land and labor. In spring 2022, members of our racial equity team and others began meeting to consider ways to examine and make our congregation more aware of our church's history of enslavement, as well as find ways we could be helpful to impacted people in the present moment. We decided one way for us to be useful would be to promote and support the work of a group focused on slavery. We decided to engage with the Slave Legacy History Coalition, founded by the Lloyd family. The Lloyds are descendants of Cuba and her son Darby, slaves of Isaac Vassall, first funder of the Harvard Law School. The mission of the Slave Legacy History Coalition is to provide easier access to information and resources on the legacy of slavery before and after emancipation for the families of slave descendants and the general public. You can search online at Slave Legacy History Coalition to learn about their impressive story and work, including their fascinating monthly Zoom presentations. Over the next year and a half, with the active support of our ministers and lay leadership, we gradually increased congregational awareness. Some of the milestone events were: in February 2023, Senior Minister Rob Hardies delivered a sermon inspired by the story of Cicely, the African-American girl enslaved by our minister, Reverend William Brattle. It's available at YouTube, Remember, Reckon, Repair. In March 2023, the First Parish Governing Board voted to affiliate with the Slave Legacy History Coalition. In April 2023, the Slave Legacy History Project Working Group began meeting monthly to support SLHC initiatives and to share information about participants' respective racial justice-related projects. This group, coordinated by parishioner Elizabeth Klein, was highly effective and continued to meet for 2 years. For the month of May 2023, we shared our Sunday offering with the Slave Legacy History Coalition. Its leaders, Dennis Lloyd and his daughter, Egypt, joined us at the May 21st worship service. During this service, Dennis gave an inspiring presentation on the coalition's goals and activities. First Parish owns colonial silver that is on loan to the MFA, and in May 2023, Julie Duncan and Gloria Korsman visited the MFA to advocate for reparative historical interpretations. In October 2023, I gave a presentation to religious education students about our history of enslavement. Also in October 2023, parishioner and playwright Siobhan Braden put on a dramatic presentation relating to Sicily and the history of slavery in Cambridge. Currently, our congregation, led by the Racial Equity Team, continues with the Slave Legacy History Coalition, the UU Urban Ministry, Greater Boston Interfaith Organization, Alternatives for Community and Environment, UU Mass Action, and other First Parish affiliates to help spread information about the history and consequences of slavery in Cambridge and Boston, and to participate in efforts to research, honor, and memorialize slaves and their descendants whose lives and stories have been suppressed and ignored throughout our shared history. Our Indigenous Justice Working Group provides opportunities for the congregation to advocate for Indigenous justice. Through activities such as leading worship services, sponsoring book and film discussions, joining efforts of the UU Mass Action Indigenous Solidarity Team, and encouraging participation in the National Day of Mourning, the group seeks to work toward dismantling the legacies of colonialism by educating ourselves, reckoning with our own history, and developing relationships with Indigenous groups in the community. Reverend Hardies said in his February 2023 sermon, "I hope we will continue to lift up stories like Cicely's that reveal the legacies of racial violence and subjugation that shaped and shape our community, because the story isn't over yet. We can write a new ending. That is the opportunity before us, to join with others to repair the legacies of harm and resist structures of oppression. We can help write a new ending to this story that is simultaneously a beginning of a new, more just, and more loving future for all of us." Last fall, the Lloyds and other SLHC members and supporters joined in a celebration to mark the opening of the Darby Vassal Upper School, which replaced the former Vassal Lane Upper School. This name change was officially described as a deliberate effort to distance the school from the slave-owning Vassal family and to honor Darby Vassal, a formerly enslaved person who became an abolitionist and advocate for education. The renaming process involves students, staff, and the community, culminating in the selection of a new name to reflect Cambridge's values. A concrete and inspiring example of beginning a new, more just, more loving future for all of us.
It's a lot of information. Are you all still with us? Awesome. I'm Reverend Erica Richmond, she, her pronouns. I'm the parish minister at First Parish Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Arlington. I'm joined by Maggie Carey, and there are many of us from First Parish here who contributed to this work. So as in many things, two folks are not representing all the work that went into this. But we're glad to be here with you. So Black theologian, liberation theologian James Cone says that slavery is America's original sin. And so much of this history, this kind of wrestling with slavery was not new for many of our folks, but it energetically felt different when we started to uncover the history right in our congregation. And I'm sure that's true for many of you, that it hits differently when you kind of know people's names and learn people's stories. So I started looking into this research along the same time that the town of Arlington was doing this important work in the summer of 2022. And I gave a sermon in the fall of 2022 entitled Knowing Our Own Backyard. And this title came from the old burying ground, which is the cemetery next to the First Parish of Arlington. And in that old burying ground is an unmarked, well, at the time, unmarked grave of free and enslaved people of color. It is now dedicated and properly marked. But at the time, that was sort of one of the jump starts to this research, is the town was asking questions of who is in this unmarked grave. And I learned that many of our founding fathers or households of our congregation, which split from the First Parish in Cambridge, that many of those founding folks were enslavers. And we traced the money because they were these pew owners. So these old churches had pew boxes, and wealthy families could purchase them. And that money went to fund the congregation. And so we learned that many of those pew owners back in the mid-1700s were enslavers. So our first minister was Reverend Samuel Cook, and we found in our records, just like Cambridge showed, in our records, our membership records, our baptismal records, there are enslaved people listed. And we know horrific language that sort of desensitizes us to the violence of slavery, and that was true in our membership books. Kate was listed as a gift to Jason Russell. She was 3 months old at the time. We know that this was a pattern that many wealthy enslaving families in Boston would sell people, enslaved people to kind of the rural areas. And so Kate was listed as such. So she was baptized at 3 months old in our congregation. She was enslaved by Jason Russell for the entirety of her life. She lived into her 60s. Jason Russell, some of you might know that name. There is a historic house in Arlington still that was his. He was part of the Revolutionary War and is often was seen as a hero. And as with many myths that are debunked, things were complexified, and we found out he was an enslaver of Kate. So these stories, Kate, along with other folks we know that were enslaved by members of our congregation, such as Punch and Venus and Isaiah and Dinah, we started to learn these stories, and we started to sort of do the work many of you have done, which is to demythologize that the North was exempt from some of these violent institutions of slavery. So we watched the movie Traces of the Trade together, which really effectively outlines how much money was coming from slavery into the North. We had folks in our congregation who had done their own family ancestral work, and they were shared with us what does it mean to move beyond guilt to action. And the group named themselves Reckoning and Repair. It was about 20 folks within our congregation started this work as a committee. And we had to move at the speed of trust, to quote Adrienne Marie Brown. So we had to keep learning together, do the hard work of examining what does it mean to have white privilege, to dismantle white supremacy culture. We know that work is internal, that those of us who are white have to do, and it's also external. What does it mean to do reparations? So like I said, there's now a marker within the old burying ground, and we also know that there was segregated seating in our original meeting house. So we wanted to also honor the fact that even folks who were free were forced to sit in different areas within our original meeting house.
Thanks, Reverend Erica. This is a photo of the commemorative pew and bench that an Eagle Scout person looking for an Eagle Scout badge, a senior in our youth group, made for us. They're both prominently displayed. The pew is at the front of our sanctuary, and the bench is in our front welcoming hallway. We want to make sure we see them so we never forget. Dr. Michael Curry, the president of the Mass League of Community Health Centers, spoke with us. He was a guest preacher, and one of the things he said to us, in addition to encouraging us to do this hard work, was to get out of Arlington. Arlington is white, it's privileged, and there's not a lot that needs to happen in Arlington. That was excuse me, good news to hear, but it was sobering. But he was right, of course. Many of us grapple with the term gift, as Reverend Erica mentioned. This painting depicts Kate as she looks out from the Jason Russell's house's kitchen. Arlington artist and First Parish member Marilyn Downs painted this, and she's donated it to us. This too is prominently displayed in our front lobby. So all of our efforts paid off when our congregation voted overwhelmingly in favor of our affirmation. And the affirmation is a one-page document that includes an acknowledgement of our true past, our true history, not what we read in the books, but the true history that indeed, as Reverend Erica said, there was slavery in the North. But it also included a commitment to reparations. And we passed this overwhelmingly, over 80%, without having identified at this point who we were going to donate our reparations to, both financial reparations as well as our volunteering.
So I think many things are true at the same time. There is work to do in Arlington, and there's work to do beyond Arlington. There's work to do internally, there's work to do externally. And we know that the process of dismantling white supremacy and its legacy is never ending. There's no checkbox that we're ever going to achieve, right? So it's a commitment to do this. It's just a forever project, right? That this is what it means to be folks committed to racial justice. But we wanted reparations to be both financial, that there was a really real need for monetary reparations, and to be relational.
So our next step was how to find a partner. So we developed a subgroup called Outreach and Partnership, some of whom are here, whose daunting task was to find an organization with whom we could partner so that we can share our time, talent, and treasure. There were many well-deserved organizations, but who can benefit the most? And we knew we needed to get out of Arlington. Many time-consuming meetings later, it made the most sense to turn to an organization with whom First Parish had already had a relationship with for decades, and that meant the Urban Ministry. We had long been a member congregation of the Urban Ministry, and our delegates had routinely kept our congregation apprised of events over the years. And our annual donation of our Christmas Eve offerings went to the Renewal House, and that was important to us. And it got us thinking more about urban ministry. So now our work with urban ministry took on a new level of interest. We reached out and did an initial Zoom call with Robert Jones, the Congregational Engagement and Volunteer Coordinator. We were invited to take a tour of all the different programs at the urban ministry that they support. We attended open houses. We went to their annual meeting. We then saw the Roxbury youth programs, and we thought, ooh, this is pretty cool. This is an after-school initiative that provides a place for high schoolers to go to do all sorts of things, including getting a hot meal, resting if they want, workshops, resume writing, trying to figure out what they want to do after high school. We were intrigued and very, very impressed. We began more intense discussions about how we might partner with the Roxbury youth programs. We then asked them for some proposals as to what would our donations, what would our participation look like. They responded with 3 proposals for funding at various levels, and they provided some examples of how we could volunteer at Roxbury Youth Programs, including after-school workshops and helping with anything that they might need for their programs. It was a yes, yes, yes. We were very, very excited, and that's from their website. So Robert Jones, Karsten Cash, and some of the Roxbury Youth Program's teens talked with our congregation to help us kick off a month of fundraising just this past November. They shared details of how their program works, and the enthusiasm from our congregation was palpable. Over the next 4 weeks, we raised over $32,000 from 67 households. So we are on our way. We formalized a 3-year commitment with Roxbury Youth Programs. We will have bi-monthly meetings with the staff there to plan, evaluate, and give feedback back and forth. What is working, what is not working, what can we do, where should we hold off, that sort of thing. In addition to the financial support, we're committed to volunteering. And 2 folks from First Parish are all set in April to offer some workshops, one on blacksmithing, which is what they wanted. This is a wonderful picture of our first donation to Roxbury Youth Programs. This is Andrea Winslow donating $27,000 check to Vinnie Miles at Urban Ministries, Roxbury Youth Programs. And then the Urban Ministry recognized First Parish in their Congregational Spotlight newsletter, which thrilled us.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I'm the Reverend Liz Lerner-McClay. I'm the senior minister of the First Unitarian Church in Providence, and I'm joined by my wonderful lay leader, Kate Niles, who's stepping in for Reverend Peter Larman, who is ill, but Kate has been just as involved in the work, was coming anyway, and is super involved and super well briefed. So here we go. And I don't want to press the button. I just want to talk to you. Is that okay? All right. So there we go. Church in a Triangle. In 2018, our church's 300th anniversary was on the horizon, and we were thinking about how to mark the history implicit in that time span. And likewise, the movement for Black Lives was very present, I'm sure, for all of us. First, you supported the movement, publicly displayed a banner showing our support. We reached out to Black leaders and clergy within and beyond Unitarian Universalism about how to begin an intentional journey towards becoming an actively anti-racist congregation. And the input was unanimous that we had to start with really knowing our history regarding race and slavery, that this would be essential, and it really was sort of the basement level of becoming a faithfully anti-racist congregation. And we didn't know much about our history regarding race and slavery. We did know that a congregation founded in 1720 in a wealthy neighborhood in a state that led the American slave trade almost certainly had members involved in it. There were and are other facets to our efforts along with the history, including the evolution of a team of First U volunteers of all ages who created paths for our anti-racism journey with art and music and special programs over the years between then and now. We also created what became a deep partnership with a local Bethel AME minister, Pastor Howard Jenkins, and that congregation. And one of the things Howard says, which is so crucial to me, and very much informed our work going forward, was integration without relationship is still segregation. Right? Integration without relationship is still segregation. We consulted with Brown University Center for the Study of Slavery and Justice and committed time, effort, and money for the journey we needed to make. We hired a Brown history student to help church volunteers with archival research, and then COVID hit. And that student moved on. In that time, we worked with local Black faith and community leaders to support BIPOC access to reliable COVID information, and then to COVID tests, and eventually to COVID vaccines. And we were invited into that work by folks in the Black community because of work we'd already been doing. Because of COVID, we had to recalibrate our own internal efforts. About that time is when Reverend Peter Larman, a retired UCC minister with a long history of working for racial justice, joined the church. Peter volunteered to lead our Rebooted History project, which was growing into something that required greater scope in order to honor what we were finding. We also hired a new grad student, Tracy Picard, a well-regarded public historian in Rhode Island, and the two of them spent 3 years on the research and preparation of what became our book, A Church in a Triangle. Many members and leaders of the church, including Kate and so many others, within the church and the larger Rhode Island community supported this effort all through its development, and there are copies available for you to peruse on the table in the back. And buy. Our research uncovered a lot. There were a few positive discoveries. Reverend Josiah Cotton, who on Christmas Day, 1742, baptized and welcomed into the congregation people of color, including Anna Bowen, described in his notes as the Negro servant of Colonel Jabez Bowen, and Hannah Newfield, a free Indian woman. But most of our discoveries were hard. We found that during the 1830s, church members helped found an anti-abolitionist society. We thought that a minister who served between 1780 and 1803, Reverend Enos Hitchcock, might have been an abolitionist. Instead, we learned in painful detail how Reverend Hitchcock cheated the person he purchased as a young boy and always referred to as my faithful black man, Caesar. Can we get slide 2? Reverend Hitchcock did free Caesar at some point, but despite being renowned as a public education advocate, Reverend Hitchcock never even taught Caesar to read or write. This is a document of Caesar receiving a small pension that he got after Reverend Hitchcock's death. And you can see where it says Caesar Hitchcock on the lower right, there's an X. That's his mark, because he didn't know how to write his name. We did find one serious abolitionist linked to the church, but it was a person remembered in the congregation only as Black Dan, a sexton who worked for the church between 1829 and 1860. Can we get the next slide? Daniel Nelson Morse, we found his name, had come to Rhode Island from the South. His wife Phoebe was born free in North Kingstown, Rhode Island, to parents who had been formerly enslaved. Both Daniel and Phoebe Morse were leaders in Providence's Black community. Not only that, we also learned that Daniel Morse had been a co-founder of the Bethel AME Church in Providence, the same church with which we had grown into a close relationship. We were grateful to be able to share our information about Daniel and Phoebe Morse with Bethel, and they were very glad to learn it. They did not have any of that history. Daniel Morse was also a founder of Wilberforce University in Ohio, one of the first HBCUs in the country. So there was a nationally leading abolitionist connected to our church, but not a white one. Slide 4. An emotional and spiritual center of our work has been finding and speaking the names of those people of color who were unacknowledged in our history. Most still remain unknown to us, but some have been uncovered by our research. These people, of course, were not allowed to tell their own stories, and even the inscriptions on their gravestones, if they have gravestones, were written by their enslavers. We have spoken a lot of their names aloud together in worship, and we are continuing to move forward in relationship with those names. Can we do the next slide? Thank you so much for doing this. But we know that all these people have stories for us to learn and reckon with, and our ongoing task is to seek them out, honor everything we can find, always bearing in mind how much and how many are missing from our findings. This is the same Anna Bowen who was welcomed into the church by Reverend Cotton. Lastly, I just want to touch on 2 challenges we've come to recognize in our journey. The first is how to make this journey really accessible to more people within our congregation and in the wider space. How can we create better resources for different forms of learning and personal evolution? And how do we hold together as a beloved community of people who aren't already all in exactly the same place on our journeys of evolution. It doesn't feel like enough to have a group of committed folks and then other people who know there's like some bad stuff out there. We haven't begun our conversation about reparations because I don't feel that enough of our people know enough of our history to have a meaningful conversation about that yet. Not because I want to delay the conversation, but it has to be really informed. People actually have to know what it is we are making reparations for and who the people are. And what do we owe Anna Bowen, whose gravesite is falling apart? We can't answer that question if most of the people in the church don't yet know about Anna Bowen. And not everybody is going to read our tome, our beautiful tome, that is hundreds of pages of highly detailed and dense information. So how else can we make that accessible to people? The second challenge is, how do we sustain this commitment in impactful ways, even as other crises in the world and in our nation pile up on top of each other? Yes, this is all intersectional, but it all requires focused, specific responses right now in order to be effective. At First U, it is taking tremendous effort to complete our foundational commitment to 2 curricula based on our book. One is for adults, one is for middle schoolers, to help better acquaint our people with our history without requiring everybody to wade through the book, which I do love. Preparing these curricula for our people is not yet finished, and when it is at best the end of the beginning of what we need to do as a congregation on this journey. And we are staying the course, but this part of the work is slow and hard and frustrating. And the challenges moving through this will not stop us, and they are real.
It's hard to follow someone who gives a really good sermon every week. I stay on Anna for a minute. So Peter Larman and Tracy Picard knew they would have no difficulty identifying domestic enslavers among the members of a seaport church founded in 1720. They found lots of them. But they wanted to go deeper and learn how the enslavers acquired the wealth to own human property in the first place. This, of course, took them to the triangle trade, in which Little Rhode Island played a unique and central role, with nearly 1,000 slaving voyages originating there. You may know that Rhode Island's share in the nefarious trade constituted 80% of New England's human trafficking and 2/3 of the total Native American slave trade. Next slide. Yeah, oh yes, the coat of arms. Okay, the Marin Crest. One early church family that was involved in the maritime trade for more than 2 centuries wasn't shy about letting us know where the money was coming from. We have to be careful to say, however, that most of the merchant traders had multiple slavery-related investments, not just in direct slave trading, but also 2-way provisioning trade with the Caribbean, shipbuilding, sail-making, candle-making, insurance underwriting, and of course rum distilling, with 140 stills in operation all across Rhode Island in 1770. So the Nightingale House, I think the next slide, I'm not sure. Yes. The Nightingale House Second Meeting House, strong Rhode Island rum, known as Guinea rum, was welcomed as currency at the British-controlled and other African trading stations. And the Rhode Island traders were universally known as rum men in Africa. 85% of their trading goods on their vessels consisted of rum. And Rhode Island traders shipped a total of 11 million gallons of it to Africa over 100 years of human trafficking. The lead distiller in Providence was called Clark and Nightingale. Its major investors were church members. One of them, Joseph Nightingale, built this mansion with rum-derived wealth in 1792. Enslaved people were involved in the mansion's construction and may also have been involved in building our second meeting house at nearly the same time. The meeting house was located just 2 blocks away and was designed by the same architect, a church member. During the 1790s, the church was rolling in cash. And I think the next slide. Yeah, well, maybe not. This was the crest of a second wave of rum-fueled slave trading, which was centered in Providence and Bristol and not Newport. Okay, yeah. The Benevolent Congregational Society, thanks to Roger Williams, who I otherwise think is pretty cool, Rhode Island congregations could not collect general taxes. They needed workarounds to support themselves. In our case, the workaround was an all-male business arm called the Benevolent Congregational Society that owned all the property and paid the ministers for a period of 96 years. The charter members in 1770 belonged to the church, but this gentleman's club very quickly enrolled other wealthy men from around town who were not church members. They bought and sold a lot of land. They were invested in several banks and did business with each other. Over time, the society came to be dominated by men involved in a second major source of church wealth, the cotton mill fever, that swept through Rhode Island from 1794 onward. I should add that the Benevolent Congregational Society's motto through all these years was goodwill toward men, which pretty much sums it up. The rapid rise of cotton mill fever and the close family and commercial ties between Providence and slaveholding South also explains why there was no talk of abolitionism from our ministers during the 1830s and 40s. I think there might be the next slide. Let's see. So that was the Benevolent Society. Okay, this is just a hogshead. So just so you know what a hogshead of rum looks like or molasses, that's what that looks like. So yeah, so just that's that. And the next one. Okay, so Sea Captain's Painting. This is actually a very famous painting. If you look at it, it's pretty much debauchery going on. It's in Suriname. Our focus right now is twofold. We are working really hard on developing engaging and accessible curricular materials for both adult study circles and middle schoolers. We need to put energy and care into this because we don't want this history to be the preoccupation of just a small set of the subset of the congregation. We want the whole congregation to wrestle with and own it, which is no small challenge in a large church where lots of people are doing lots of different things. So I just want to point out that some of the men who are getting pretty drunk here have names like Hopkins, and these are big names in Providence. You'll see the street names right around there. So these are the same people. Our project that we believe will help on both the inward-facing and public-facing sides of our work is something that we are now developing for this anniversary year of American independence. It's a graphic novel for use in schools and colleges called Sugar Rush, the Caribbean Roots of Rhode Island's Rebellion. Peter and the book's illustrator are still scripting the book and blocking out the pages, but I can share the basic idea. The novel's protagonist is an African-American college student from Providence who comes across a strange painting entitled Rhode Island Sea Captains, no, that's it, yeah, Carousing in Suriname. She wants to know who these Rhode Islanders were and what they were doing so far from home in the 1750s when the painting was made. The key, of course, is what the men are drinking and puking up. Sorry, but that's what they're doing. They are Rhode Island rum men, and several of them will also become major players during the Revolution. Okay, I have 2 minutes. Okay, so that's what's going on there. That's where she follows it. Cool novel. So we haven't done 20 events or whoever that was. It was Belmont. I was floored. But we did. Last May, we officially released our book, had a great exhibit-filled weekend, ending with a very moving service organized by Reverend Liz. On that Saturday, there was a panel discussion followed by paradramatic events in the meeting house, a kind of roll call of which the white man who purchased the pews when the current meeting house went up in 1816, and also a passionate evocation in poetry and song of the spirits of many black ancestors who haunted this troubled history. I think the next slide, actually. Yes, okay. So then in October, we were blessed by a visit from Brandon Nightingale, a PhD candidate, that's him there, at Howard University, who had independently traced his Georgia family roots to the white Nightingales of Providence. We are continuing to build on the relationship with Brandon as we explore the vital north by south connections of our history, much like the Cuban connection here. So, and finally, the last one okay, so next slide. This is the distinguished Peter Larman, who just is so dressy, I can never live up to it. And then Greg Amore, who is our Secretary of State. And he's holding forth earlier this month at a reception for our exhibit that was held at the Rhode Island State House. That's our Secretary of State, a big fan of our work, who, by the way, was a high school history teacher, I believe, holding the book. After a 3-month run at the State House, our exhibit will come down Monday morning, and it is hoped that it will be permanently installed in our parish house, where generations to come will see it and be reminded that our history is a lot more complicated than a long list of white ministers' names and a big Paul Revere bell hanging in the belfry. Thank you.
All right. So that was a lot. I want to invite you all again to have a deep breath in. Yeah. So we're going to have a little bit of time for some question and answer. And then we're going to have some more food and some break. And then we're going to come back for our second half of our time together with our wonderful Dr. Sophia Boyer, who I'll introduce before that time. But for now, if anybody has a question, I can run around with this one here. Do you want to hold that one? It could be for anybody in all of the different groups. Does anybody have a question that they would like answered? Yeah. Here. Do you have that one? No, yeah. Leave it connected to that. There's another handheld over there. I should. We're dodging the cameras. And I should have said, this is all being recorded, so we'll be able to share the recording with all of you, and you can share with other folks in your communities. Go ahead.
Actually, you did just answer my question. Some of the material on the slides was really very interesting, and could we get a copy of the slides? Would the presenters be willing to do that?
Yeah, yes to all of it. So we'll send this out and make it available to anybody else. Any other questions? Yeah. Here we go.
So, sure. So I was curious that the term human trafficking wasn't used by some of us, including First Parish Arlington. We don't use that terminology, and I know how important language is. And I'm wondering if we should be using those harsh words to describe it.
Yeah. This is, Karen is one of our presenters and an educator in addition, so yeah. Yeah, here, or here. Can somebody scamper around with that one? Yes. Very much working.
I'm just curious where you were going with that question. So human trafficking versus what other language?
I kind of feel like we don't say, I think language is so important, and I think we're, at least at First Parish Arlington, we're not using that terminology. We're using enslavement, enslavers, slaves, but it's the process is human trafficking, and that's a harsh couple of words, and I think that harshness will be helpful.
Yeah, and one of the beautiful programs that Dr. Boyer led here with a lot of our board and other people from the congregation spent a fair bit of time really sinking into the reality of what we're actually talking about. Like, let's have a little time and talk about what, like, slavery actually is. And actually, one of our wonderful guests there in the back from the Perkins School has some Braille versions of slave ships. And so I encourage everybody to visit that table, because it really is part of really driving. Anybody else? Questions?
I would also say, if you can say who you are, where you're from, and who specifically you're directing the question to.
Sure. I'm Alma Stosa from the First Parish in Brookline, and this is for the First Church in Arlington. The question, I know you talked about the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers, and I was the director who spoke, and I'm just curious as to, like, what specifically was said. I'm curious to see, like, you know, how that related to everything else as far as reparations.
Yeah, that was Michael Curry, who was invited to speak to us in May of 2024. He's the CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers. He has always been involved with promoting minorities and people of color, because the community health centers in Massachusetts are predominantly mass health recipients who are predominantly people of color. His sermon was extraordinary because he challenged us to continue this really hard work. And he said, we have to do it, we have to be brave about it. The people before us were brave. We need more white people doing this. We need the allies. And that's when then he concluded by saying, but get out of Arlington. Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, I'm Donna Ruvalo. I'm a member here at First Church in Belmont. And my question is about the broader communities. I realize that many of you folks are working with Brown and Harvard in the universities, but I was particularly interested in the towns where you're located, and if there had been, whether this information is being received, people are receptive to learning about this, if there's been pushback more recently, based on our current administration. I realize that's a pretty broad question, but I guess I'm just, because so many of our Unitarian founders were also town founders, it's so closely related. Just wondering about that.
Yes, we're in Roxbury, and Roxbury being...
Sir, would you like to stand?
Oh, sure. Hi, I'm Tom Plant with the UU Urban Ministry in Roxbury, and one of our connections when doing this work on enslavement history of Africans and indigenous people is our close connection to Harvard University. Roxbury was one of the conveners or founders of Harvard College, and they were to provide ministers to the faithful, but they didn't talk about the enslavement and how people really prospered from that enslavement. And so we are working with them, but we're working to educate our community about that legacy that still remains invisible in the history taught in our school systems, not being said in the boardrooms, not being said in health, because we have legacies of health disparities and health inequities that arrived from slavery to today that we're still dealing with in Boston. So that's some of the things that we're involved with.
And I think we'll have time for one more. But again, this is the whole point of our time together today. Do please seek out the groups that you have questions from and say a little.
Hi, excuse me, Gage Heath from UU Area Church in Sherburne, Mass. Kind of related to the question that you asked and directed to really all of you. I'm so impressed with what you all have done. We have become very aware of the phrase proceed at the speed of trust. In some of the other UU churches that we've shared stories with, they have had a great deal of grief in their congregation as they began to create awareness, which we agree is extremely hard to do, and even had memorial services for the heroes of their church who were not regarded as heroes exactly anymore. Have you run into that? Do you have any advice?
So to just underline that amazing thing you just said, ma'am, you're saying people who weren't fans of the work held memorial services for the slavers who you were trying to, that's a book. That's a complicated, amazing question. Anybody from anybody? Yeah, Liz.
I think it's not a coincidence that First Unitarian didn't know its history about, and when I first got there and we started talking about this, they were saying, yeah, so we don't know anything, so maybe there's nothing to know. And it is also perhaps not coincidental that there's a lot of people at First U. I've been a UU all my life. I was raised this. There are more people who are lifelong people there, or second or even third generation, than any other congregation I've been to. It is a precious place for them. So it's really painful to hear that the place you adore, that is what you hope is, a source of goodness and solace and blessing, has such a terrible contamination at its root. That said, there has not been resistance to actually engaging the work, even from people who initially said, we don't know. I think we gave a lot of room for acknowledging the fact that this would be painful and hard and necessary, but legit. I don't think we were ever saying, look, we just need to do this, so let's just, toughen up and pull up our big girl pants or whatever. I think there was enough conversation at the beginning about the fact that it would be hard and we had to do it, and it was okay that it was painful, and it was okay to be pained. It didn't mean you weren't a good person that this was painful for you. I think that left some emotional and spiritual room that everybody needed in order to own it. And that kind of goes to my second question about when everybody's not on the second challenge I named, when everybody's not in exactly the same place, by which I don't mean to say people don't like the work or don't care about the work, but everybody's not in exactly the same place. How do we hold everybody together so that we're not just taking the enlightened few or breaking our church, which actually is the opposite of the work we're trying to do?
Yeah. So we'll have about 15 minutes. Please eat all the food. Charlie is waving his hand. Charlie wants one more question? Sure. Here we go. Yeah, I'm running. Hold on. I'll bring you the question. Here you go.
Morning, everyone. My name is Will. My pronouns are they, them, and their. I'm from First Church Jamaica Plain. At every Sunday service, we, as part of our order, we read out a labor and land acknowledgement, citing that the church was built from slave labor on the unceded land of Native American people. And I'm curious, maybe not, if this is to all the presenters, and it may come out later in the collective visioning, what steps, strategies are in consideration for those reparations of the unceded land?
That's great. Thank you. Did you want answers now or? Yeah. It's a question. Anybody? Yeah. Right. Well, thank you. Yeah. I appreciate it. Yeah, I appreciate that. And in addition, all of the folks from all of the other churches here, I mean, again, part of our intention here together is to begin all of these conversations. So thank you all for being here. Please do stay for the second half. Please do go finish all the food, use all of the bathrooms. There's 2 right there. There's a whole nother set of bathrooms down the stairs over there. And we'll ring a bell with about 5 minutes, but we'll be back in here at 11. All right, welcome back, everyone. We are very mindful of the precious gift of your time and all that you are doing in the rest of your day. I have the great joy of introducing our incredible, I just got a finger. Oh, it's the fine finger. Yeah, no, they're good. I believe in the stragglers. So over the course of these journeys together, all these different congregations that you've heard from, so many people have helped contribute to all of our work. And I have the great joy of introducing you all to Dr. Boyer, who's been a huge part of our process. And for those of you who like introductions where you say, fancy people said this person is fancy, trust me, fancy people have said this person is fancy, and she does fancy things in fancy places. She has fancy letters before and after a fancy name. The thing I really want to tell you about is her heart that I've seen over the course of these last many parts of our work together. She's been instrumental in helping guide our inquiry, helping guide our work, but then also helping shepherd work with our entire town. She was the keynote speaker at our MLK breakfast this year, and with a huge array of folks all across the town, helped shepherd a truly beautiful process nested in this work that we're doing together here. She's helped with our committee, but then also has hosted a number of these workshops with our board and whole community. It's been a really beautiful experience. And deep down, she's an educator, as you're about to experience, and she's going to lead us through this time together. But I am so grateful for all that she has been for us, for all that she'll be together, for all of us here in this time, and for all that she's been in the world and will continue to be. So welcome, everybody, Dr. Boyer.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Chris. So I really want to say this. You know how sometimes people say things and they don't really mean it? But I really mean it, I'm being honest with you. It is wonderful to be here with you today. In the current times we're in, we need to be around folks who are like-minded. who are moving forward and who are justice driven. If not, we get stuck in this muck and we don't move anywhere. So for me, getting to Belmont, I'm in Boston, so I'm really not that far away. But commuting here this morning and being in this space and being with all of you is really important to me, my journey, and just my lived reality as a human being on the planet today. I also want to start with that this is not my work. This is not I work. This is our collective work. And really, for me, I'm centering today, my speech today, on the work that has been done by the various congregations, right? You have been doing the work. And in doing that work, we see sort of different trajectories of moving forward. As was said by everyone today, this work is not done. How can it be done? And also, this work is necessarily not going to be impactful if we use the same systems that the folks who oppressed these human beings did. It's just, so what do we, right? Spreadsheets and banks and banking systems and meeting notes, that they were doing the same thing when they were enslaving human beings who look like me. So what we have to do really, for me, the deeper work is, this is spiritual work regardless of your religious or spiritual affiliations or not. This is human work. So I was tasked by the amazing, really hardworking team in Belmont to follow up on this morning's amazing session. And I was like, how am I going to do that? Like, God, how do you follow up with that? And when I am at a loss, the first thing I do is, I'm a woman of faith, I go to God, and I said, what am I supposed to do? Where are you leading me? And led me to this presentation. So we're gonna go through it together, experience it together, and then we'll have some conversation. Everybody with me? All right, cool. So before we begin, it's important for me to note, we had some folks speak today, and we might have some folks in the audience today who are African American, born in the United States, and ancestry of chattel slavery. That is not my experience. I was born in Haiti, and a mixed heritage background since the 1700s, and some of my ancestry were enslaved folks, and some were not. And so when I do this work, that's important for me to put that positionality, because this work for me is also giving back to the ancestors of chattel slavery in the United States and the indigenous people of the United States, so that I can stand in front here to you today. They have done the work to desegregate and so on and so on and so forth, so I could stand here today. So I really want to acknowledge that. All right, cool. Let's continue. So for today, we're going to focus on sort of three themes. The first theme you see here is to honoring the folks who presented this morning. The second theme of this session, and this is an attempt, is to look outward and imagine what we can do collectively in this room together. So this morning we heard of individual groups. Of course, the groups were not individual people, but individual collectives doing something together. This afternoon for us to, or this morning, for us to think about what could we do collectively together, right? We have a lot of folks in the room. And thirdly is to think about dreaming as one of the methodologies of moving forward with the reparative work, right? If we know some of the systems that were used to enslave folks and continue on these systems, there's no point of us replicating some of these. So what if we think about dreaming? And we're gonna look into a concrete scholar's work called Freedom Dreaming in a bit, okay? All right, so two really important points to think about, because I know we have folks in the participants of varying understandings of reparation work. This is not an end-all, be-all definition. That was one of my pain points in education, when folks would say, I have a PhD in economics. Well, what kind of economics? There's many different forms of economics. Or I, have a master's degree in psychology. What kind of psychology? There's many different types of psychology, right? And so a lot of times when we have these definitions, we're making an assumption that it is one definition by one group of people, right? Psychology at McLean Hospital looks very different than psychology of an ethnic group in parts of Senegal, for example, right? So this definition is a type of definition, right? It's a definition. It's a scholarly definition that I tend to use, but again, understanding that there's varied definitions of reparations, right? And so for this, to think about reparations in two parts, right? You have material repair or material reparations. This one is sort of easier to analyze sometimes because it's concrete, all right? Tangible acts of repair. So again, Maggie from Arlington here, asked the question about language. So some of this will help understand some of that language, okay? Is that reparations is repair. Something was done that was wrong, and now we're gonna repair it. It's if you think about it, at its core, it's very basic understanding. And so material repair, material reparations, land returns, property restorations. So somebody came and took somebody's land, and now they give it back, or they give a partial back, or they pay for the land that they took, right? Property restorations, somebody took a building over, so they give the building back to the original folks, or their ancestors, the ancestors of the folks they took it for, or they paid for the building that they took for free. Financial transfers or direct compensation. A 3-month-old baby was gifted to a human being. Where is that 3-month-old baby who was gifted? Where are their relatives? Are they on Mass Health in Massachusetts? So now you're saying, look, I can't go back and change the past, but I'm going to give money to that family. Community investment and economic development, what the First Church in Roxbury work is doing, right? We don't know who these folks are. We cannot find their relatives, or we haven't found them yet. We don't have technology yet, or the time, or the energy, many different reasons for that. So as a result, we're gonna give funds to an organization that is giving back to a marginalized community, or what I like to say is minoritarized community. So a community that is made a minority. They're not the minority, but they're made the minority. And when you're a minority, people can abuse you and do a lot of stuff to you. When you're the majority, it's kind of harder. Or economic development. Bring in a factory where folks can work and make money, and et cetera, right? There's also institutional accountability for documented harms. Because we know, especially in intellectual New England, if things are not in writing, then it didn't happen. If it's not in an archive at Harvard, MIT, it didn't happen. Or Brown, it just didn't happen if they're not archived. So archive them. Right? Then you also have symbolic repair. And a lot of times, I have to say, folks minimize this part. They really do. Okay? Wait, you took the labor of all these people for generations and you put together a statue? Right? And you hear these, again, these are debates and conversations in both polite society and impolite society. And part of the reparation work is, how do you engage in conversation, if you choose to, so that people at least can hear you? So, for symbolic reparation, right, we have public apologies, liturgical confessions, and I believe the brother in the back from Jamaica Plain said that this is what they do every Sunday. You have memorials, historical markers, and commemorations. What some of you all are doing with the either unmarked graves or graves that were incorrectly inscribed, you're correcting that. That's part of that work, right? We have a beautiful, memorial at the King's Chapel. It's beautiful, by an amazing Cuban artist that Gina hit me up to. So amazing work, beautiful work. Rituals, acts of repentance, and public truth-telling, which is what we're doing here today. Or if you didn't want to do that, you wouldn't be here today. So that's why it really is wonderful for me to be here and a pleasure for me to be here with you, because I believe in that work. And then we also have historical acknowledgement in congregational archives, etc. Retelling the true story, and we'll do a little bit more work on that. So these are the two sort of registers, right? If we think about it, two types of reparations. And what tends to happen in reparations work is folks get stuck one or the other, and there's always debate. Give me my money, give me my land back. I don't want your statue. But we can only do a statue right now. We don't have the finances, and it becomes this tug and pull, right? And again, this is not my work, but in this type of definition of reparations, which came out of the work of the Cold War, right? After the Cold War in Latin America, you had countries that were devastated based on US policies and other policies. And this is sort of like, how do we repair that? And then, of course, South Africa, how do we repair that? So this is what this type of reparative work is. And so it's important to note that reparations must be understood in both dimensions, right? And that each is essential and neither is sufficient alone. If I simply use the same banks that enslave people to pay somebody back for something, but I never acknowledge what was done, and I don't live with it on a daily basis, it doesn't go anywhere, which, again, every single presenter today spoke about. This work cannot, you can't, there's no quick, easy, simple way to sort of repair, right? Also, it's important to note that symbolic reparations are not secondary. They are inseparable from material repair. Like, if we can hold that, then our conversation is just going to become richer and richer. Okay? So, as an educator, there's one thing I learned, is that, especially when I taught middle school, high school, and college, and et cetera, right? Higher education. But I like to use middle school, because they're a tough group, middle schoolers, man. Like, it's like you're a comedian, you're going in front of a group, and everybody's like, boo, you suck. And you're like, oh my gosh. And it's every day, relentless. They will not give up. They're tough critics. And when you've taught for a very long time, what you realize is you might have 25 people in a room understanding what an apple is, the fruit apple, in 15 different ways. And so you spend all your energy, yeah, apple, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, New England, you pick the apple. Oh, yeah, there's different. And then you ask a question at the end, and they're like, I don't know what you were saying. So when I'm in front of a group of folks, this is when my sort of teacher behaviors and practices come out, is that for me, the quickest way to get a group of people with differing access points and entry points into a topic is to actually analyze text. Because I could talk on and on and on, but to look at something and read something and you process it with whatever prior knowledge you have is going to be more impactful. So what we're going to do today is we're going to analyze a fictitious case study on a group of people collaborating on a reparations initiative. Everybody with me? This is not a directive. Reverend Chris and other people in this group can tell. I never tell anybody what to do. You decide what to do. Your heart tells you what to do. This is a fictitious case study which is going to help us process what are some methodologies we can use to work together. Everybody with me? So this is like a practice. All right? Cool. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a context, then you'll read. I had my daughter who's 22, I had an 18-year-old, and I read it. It took us 10 minutes. So I'm going to give you some time to process, but if you need more time, you'll need more time, right? But I'm just going to give you a brief overview, so when it's time to read the case study, it makes more sense. Make sure my time here. Okay, so spring of 2026, 10 years from now. Somebody wrote this, 10 years from now. So it's 2036, right, 10 years? Yeah, it's 2036. So we're reading this, 2036. Spring 2026, public historical memory is under pressure. Smithsonian exhibits revised, removed, university DI programs. Critics call it the Great Silencing. A cascade of legislative and administrative actions is steadily reducing the racial history. At a UU Reparative Summit 10 years ago, 20 plus congregations faced defining questions. What if anything can we do together that no single congregation could do alone? Part 2 of the case study is some academic framing, because we are intellectual New England after all, which I like. I'm not, no shade, I love it. This is my jam. I love being intellectual New England. Right? So this is the guiding framework, because you can use so many frameworks to build consensus. This is a guiding framework. The guiding framework is this, or this is what they used 10 years ago. Freedom dreaming rooted in Robin D.G. Kelly's framework, the summit asked these questions. Sites of memory must be irreversible, not subject to legislative rollback. The narrative of repair must be transnational. Because these folks were sitting in Belmont talking about things that happen in Africa and in the South, but they're in Belmont. Slavery was a global economic system. Investment must be generative, a living commitment, not a one-time transfer. Okay? The core premise of this freedom dreaming, of this brilliant group of people, reparations cannot merely be a bureaucratic settlement. They must be an act of radical imagination. The system ain't gonna save us, so we gotta create our own systems while we're living in the system. It's kind of tricky, but it's been done, or we wouldn't be standing here. I wouldn't be standing here today, and most of you wouldn't be here today. Worth noting, though, freedom dreaming is not a planning methodology. The tension between radical vision and institutional solvency runs through every decision that follows. There's a tension. We have budgets, so how are we going to freedom dream? We have some congregants who aren't at where we need to be to have these conversations. How are we going to freedom dream? We have some people who don't understand what reparation means. How are we going to freedom dream? We have some folks who don't understand that every single thing we do every day in 2026, we can connect to chattel slavery in America. We have some people who feel like, oh, my family came here in 1903 from Sweden. I don't know. I wasn't part of it. Right? So how can we freedom dream when we're dealing with these realities? But the group did it anyways. Don't stop, no stop. They kept going. All right. So this is going to make more sense when you have a short reading, but this is going to make more sense. I'm going to run through it quickly because we're running out of time. Right? These are 2 museum sites. One is in Ghana and one is in Montgomery. So I just want us to hear from the Montgomery site. Where's the sound? Can you do the sound? Oh, just put the mic. Okay, sorry. We'll try. All right, let's try it, y'all.
Fully overcome the history and legacy of slavery. It's important that we begin to commit to an era of truth and justice, that we tell the truth about our history, that we find the words necessary to understand all of the pain, all of the suffering that was created by 400 years of enslavement, lynching, segregation, and injustice. It begins in Africa, where millions of people were kidnapped, abducted, taken from their homes, taken from their families, chained, forced onto ships where they were displaced forever. Without understanding that legacy, we don't appreciate the harm, the damage, the tragedy that surrounded the founding of this country. We still live in a country where there is this problem of racial inequality, racial injustice, and the narrative that created that problem of racial difference continues to haunt us today. And so this museum is dedicated to helping people understand the journey. We want people to understand the suffering that slavery created. The demographic geography of America was shaped largely by racial terror. A landscape, a legal architecture that codified racial hierarchy continued to shape life in this country. This society, this country, this nation has work to do to fully overcome the history and legacy of slavery. At the Legacy Museum, we believe an important experience awaits each and every person, that there is a journey that must be taken to create a different kind of future. It is hard to confront these painful truths, but the powerful thing is that when we have the courage to learn the truth, we open up doors that permit justice, that permit reckoning, that permit healing. This museum is dedicated to creating a society where the children of our children are no longer burdened by the legacy of slavery, no longer presumed dangerous and guilty, no longer haunted by racial inequality no matter where they go. But to get to that society, we all have a role to play. And that's why we want you to come to Montgomery and not just see the sights, but to hear the sounds, to experience the spirit of the people who lived here, who have fought here, who have worked here, and to take that spirit with you out into the world where you can do the same. You can continue to find ways to advance justice in your society, your community, your neighborhood.
All right, so that was Robert Stevenson from the Equal Justice Initiative. Show of hands, how many folks have visited this museum in Montgomery? All right, right on. Oh my goodness. If we had more time today, I would love for you all to share what you took out of it, because that was probably one of the best learning experiences of my life. And I'm seeing people nodding that as well. That museum is brilliantly done. How many show of hands have been there with the other extensions, the other three? You know, there's like 4 sites now, I think, or 3 sites? All right, right on. Yeah. Amazing work, amazing work. All right. Oops, am I going backwards? What am I doing here? Oh, sorry. No problem. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay, cool. So that was, again, Robert Stevenson from the Equal Justice Initiative. Oh, sorry. Yes, Brian Stevenson, my bad. I apologize if he sees this, because he sat with us for hours doing some archival work. So, the next museum in Ghana is the Nchechen Museum. How many folks have been to that one? No? Okay, cool. Yeah. All right, we should talk. It's the largest outdoor museum in the country of Ghana, and this museum is on remembering the Africans that were kidnapped, death-marched, and trafficked to this part of the world. So that is the museum. So these are just some images of it. Beautiful work. When you saw the Equal Justice Initiative Museum, that exhibit with the heads, that the artist is the artist who started this museum. So he took some of his income and he actually started this museum. So both are Black-run organizations, privately run institutions. They're not the Smithsonian, okay? And I like to end with this particular, when I show the museum in Ghana, I like to end with this particular image because one of the practices of the museum is they do a lot of reparative work for diasporan Africans going back to Africa. There is healing work, there are naming ceremonies, there are art exhibits, and the exhibit you saw with the heads, anyone of African ancestry and background, you can send your picture, and student artists will actually carve them. So the heads are representing all of the people that have not been named. So if you're there, they'll take your picture. If not, you can send your picture over, and they have artists in residence who then do that. And so it's expansive amount of land. It's only a partial of the land that the museum is on. The goal is to have as many of our people who were trafficked, for that somebody remembers them in memoriam as one of those statues. All right, so what we're gonna do now, if we can turn the lights up a little bit, y'all, whoever's doing the lights, just because we're gonna do some reading, unless it's good enough. But I'm older and my eyesight's not that good, so. All right, so what we have, it's 11:34, okay? So we're gonna go until 11:44, so I'll give like 10 minutes just for you to skim through this case study. And what I would like you to do is skim through the case study, and then we'll do 5 minutes of discussion in pairs. So just somebody sitting right next to you, so we're not too much movement, and we can use our time efficiently and effectively. So when we're reading, if we can be completely silent, because some people need that. All right, and then I'll tell you when about 2 minutes, it's about 2 minutes. All right, let's come back together. Wherever you ended was where you were meant to end, so don't worry about it. You can take this home with you, all right? What I would like us to do now, in the next 5 minutes, so we have a few minutes to share, what I would like to do in the next 5 minutes is, if you can go to the last page, page 4, questions 3 and 4. So we're gonna focus just on questions 3 and 4. You're gonna pair up with somebody right next to you, so you're gonna do a pair share. You can do question 3 if the Spirit moves you, or you can do question 4, or you can do both. Time yourself and make sure it's done in 5 minutes. Everybody with me? All right, cool. If you're, I really would like folks to be with somebody, so if you're sort of seated in an area where, you're by yourself in a corner, group up with somebody and be a group of 3. This is where we do community work. We love on each other, we do stuff together, okay? So we have 5 minutes, so it's 11:45 now. At 11:50, questions 3 and questions 4, and just make sure, your partner is also getting space to speak, okay? Go for it.
All right, everybody, thank you so much. Turn around and face. This is just the beginning of a conversation. Feel free to continue it after we're done, which will be very soon. Again, I love the ones who just keep talking. They're like, I know somebody's talking, but I'm just gonna keep. You have the rest of your lives to continue this conversation. We're so glad, and still some of them are going. We're so glad for your attention. Yeah, there we go.
I think middle school teachers and folks who are in ministry had the same training, how to get people back. You guys are so excited to be talking about this, but come on, and you do it. Thank you, Reverend Chris. I appreciate the help. All right, teamwork makes the dream work. Thank you. All right, so when we again, right, we don't have time, but again, this is a beginning, a seed of a conversation. For us to get to consensus with everyone in the room and define reparations and what we're gonna do in an hour is plain old silly. Because sometimes you have to sort of have people have a clear understanding of what you're doing, because then you'll be like, how come we didn't come up with anything? What are we gonna do? This is the beginning, right? And also, I never make assumptions that folks want to do something collaboratively. You might want to continue doing individually. So this is for the folks in the room who would want to do something collaboratively, right? And again, when we think about this, the beginning, it starts with truth-telling. Well, my man Charlie in the back here, my brother from another mother, Charlie back there, is that, right, we need to name what we're doing. We have to name the people that were harmed. So it wasn't an enslaved woman. It was Sophia, or it was Gina, or it was Charlie, or it was Charlie's grandson, or it was Gina's aunt. These were human beings, trafficked, sold, bred. That's why Alabama in that museum to me is so impactful. I take groups down there for educational tours. Is that Alabama was a breeding state. My daughter went up to the Putney School, so the only reason why I understand breeding in depth is I had to deal with that because they have a cattle, dairy industry up there. But when I think about it, I'm like, oh shoot, and I would use that word. Yeah, people were bred, and then when you see the cows and you see what they're doing, and there's a whole book. I don't know if you're into that, but they take a class first year of the Putney School up in Vermont where they use genetics to sort of breed the perfect cow. That's how people that look like me were bred. And the cow could be like these human beings, they were relations that were bred together. And so when we talk about this issue, sometimes I'm like, oh my, like what are we talking about? So the first is just truth-telling. This is what happened, and then. But if we just go, okay, we're gonna do, but we don't tell the truth, what are we doing? So truth-telling. Second is public witness. We need to come in front of people and say, this is what happened, this is how I'm complicit, et cetera, et cetera. That's something to the dismay of my family I do all the time when I talk about Haiti. We were part of the problem of Haiti. My family was part of the problem in Haiti. We ran the country, and we also were part of the problem. So those two things were truth. And some of my relatives don't want to hear that, which, again, on them. But for me, I could only survive by making sure there's public witness. Because I never want a Haitian in the audience to be like, wait, Boyer, your great-grandfather sucked as a president. And I'm like, I always want to know what people think about me. So as a result, whatever I'm complicit to, I acknowledge. And I move through life with joy. Additionally, there's decision-making. And decision-making is complex, as the leaders of these different teams discussed this morning. Because decision-making is also who's at the table. And so this morning, as I was looking around, I thought to myself, if the majority of people in this room were black, what would this summit look like? Maybe it might be the same thing, maybe not. But if everyone here was black and there were a few more melanated people, what would the topics be the same? Would we use the same language? Would there be tears? Would there be wailing? Again, I don't know. But that's part of decision making. You go through it, so you do learn. Consensus is then we have to come to consensus, right? And when I think of consensus, this is one of the reasons why for me, when we do equity work, DI work, whatever you sort of want to name it, is that everybody's going all over the place. Focus on one thing. And that's one of the reasons why I am part of the UU Church of Belmont. My congregation's in Dorchester. But I feel like I am part of this congregation is because I came into this group of folks doing the work, and they already had a clear consensus. We are focusing on the descendants of the Cubans who were trafficked illegally, which is silly, right? You were trafficked illegally. But they were trafficked illegally. And that's it. They're not, okay, we're doing this and we're doing that. We're focusing on these folks and how can we repair that? Then you have logistics, which is how do you do it? So when we talk about, let's come together as a group and do what? We have to sort of think about these 5 steps or 5 areas or 5 themes, okay? Let's move on. And then also sort of, there's also tensions that we have to discuss, right? And some of the tensions are when we think about, this is particularly to not only material repair, but symbolic repair. If you invest in an institution that sways whatever way the wind blows, then your efforts are not going to live beyond you, perhaps. And so for this case study, the reason why I use these institutions is I'm familiar with them. I'm actually heading to Ghana on Monday to this museum to discuss with the, what's it called, UNESCO Ghana. What are you teaching your children in school about what happened to my ancestors? That's a conversation. And this museum is part of that. He's sort of a younger maverick artist, you know, he's doing his own thing. But the conversation of enslavement in Africa, in most of West Africa, is actually not part of common knowledge. They just see these people who look like them, speak differently, act differently, rolling up in Africa, wearing dashikis. They have no idea where we came from, what we've been through, and what we're going through. So this sort of idea of privatization paradox is important, especially as different groups here are thinking about how you are reinvesting into certain organizations and institutions. You know, geography of more responsibility, sort of when you're removed from something, like if we had, you know, plantations all around here or slave castles all around here, the conversation might feel different. Because if you're a human being, you don't walk into those spaces and not feel what happened in those spaces. And then you have, you know, framework versus budget, because, you know, money makes the world go round. So how do you have all these big ideas and then thinking about what to do with your budgets and how you allocate the budgets? I just want to put that in there, because we all know that's the major part of a case study, is the tensions that you sit with, not the grandiose ideas, okay, for that. The collective visioning. What could we do collectively that we cannot do alone? What becomes possible financially, institutionally, morally, when we act as one body, one unit, one family, one people, with one moral compass? What would meaningful impact look like across our communities in 10 years? 10 years from now, what's it gonna look like? I always think 10 years ahead, 20 years ahead, 30 years ahead, 40 years ahead, 50 years ahead. Won't do that. Okay, so as I close out, I still want, you know, to at least have 2 people share, but I'm gonna be really quick, right? This is a model for future work for folks who are interested in future work, not a directive of anyone to do anything. This was a practice run. You've had a lot of information since 9:30. You will get this PowerPoint, right? You will get the video, correct, team? Okay? Where you can now go and then your own thoughts, you'll be able to digest it, process it, and think about where it landed for you. I'm also assuming, this is an assumption, I said I never assume, but I do sometimes. I'm also assuming, Belmont team, that there'll be some kind of follow-up email where people can sort of either sign up for something or share their thoughts, et cetera, okay? Got it. After most summits, there's a follow-up, right? This was, you know, take it with you, share your interest. If follow-up feels meaningful, bring it up. If it doesn't, wait until it does. And then there are also many ways to collaborate. This is not an end-all, be-all. It could be something else that a group of us come together with and are like, this feels what we need to do today or tomorrow or the next day. Okay? All right? But before I close, I just want to just have two, if we can have like just two folks share anything in their groups, because that's one part that we didn't have time for. Yeah, just quickly, just two very short responses. Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate you walking around, Reverend Chris. And it could be on the questions you answered, or it could be on this process or anything else that's come up for you. But I at least want to hear from two folks in the room so I can share the space with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rashana Moore Evans, and I'm with King's Chapel today. I was talking to my colleague Stephen over here, and for the last 2 weeks, it's been on my mind the idea of having a slavery museum here in New England, because as we know with the South, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, people can see the plantations; they still exist. We don't have that here. And in even expanding that out to not just connecting it with Africa, but with our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, because a lot of the economic wealth from slavery actually happened on the plantations in the Caribbean. So Steve and I were just talking about that, but this just kind of confirmed that that may be a direction to go into.
Right
so
on.
Thank
So
you.
you were freedom dreaming.
Yes.
Right on.
Every
Love
day.
It.
I'm
Every
freedom
day,
dreaming.
all
Every
day.
day.
I love
That's
it. Thank you.
my way of living.
Thank you. Thank you. One more, Reverend Chris. One more.
A group of us at First Church have a Black Lives Matter film series, and it got us interested in going to the African American Museum in downtown Boston. And there I discovered that when enslaved people were emancipated, the owners were compensated for the loss of their property. What that meant was that those free people got nothing, unless, in some lucky cases, the community raised money. They fundraised for these wonderful free people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I think about today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So our time is up. There's one person I always end with when I do presentations on enslaved people. For my dissertation work, which had nothing to do with this topic, but you know, when you do the lit review, you go all over the place. It's torture, but it's worth it in the end. And this is, the person's name is Oluwale Rosala, and Oluwale Rosala was named Cujo Lewis by his enslaver/trafficker. This was the work of Zora Neale Hurston, who wrote a wonderful text in which interviewed him. And one thing he said over and over in many different ways, and you know, Zora Neale Hurston, as a culture anthropologist, wrote phonetically the way in which the person she was interviewing spoke. So you have to sort of infer some things here. But one thing he said is, I want to go back home. He was 8, I believe 8, I forgot the age, but he was later on in his years, he was not going back to Africa. He said, I want to go back to my home. I want to see my people. Don't forget my name. And he asked over and over in the interviews, remember who I am. Don't forget me. Don't forget I'm African. And this is me ad-libbing if I'm from Haiti or Jamaica or Alabama or Massachusetts. Don't forget that I'm African, and don't forget my African name and my identity. And so as I stand here, I don't purport to speak for anyone. I speak for myself, but this is sort of what I carry with me when we talk about these particular human beings and the conditions in which they found themselves in. So thank you, y'all. Appreciate you. Thank you, thank you.
So I am your breathing ambassador. So I'll invite you to take one last deep breath in all together. Let it out. We began and we will end with gratitude. First, the little detail gratitude. All of our proceedings today and much of our work as a task force has been made possible by a wonderful grant from the Unitarian Universalist funding panel. And this is a twice annual bunch of grants they give out. We've been really blessed with a lot of support with them for a bunch of great projects. I'm happy to collaborate and coach up anybody who wants to do the same in your own congregation, so check in with me afterwards. But we are going to send out the slide deck. We're going to send out the video. We'll reach out with lots of next steps, but we are deeply grateful. We give thanks for acts of radical imagination. We give thanks for all the names, for Punch and Venus and Isaiah and Kate, for Cesar, for Pompey, for so many more. We give thanks for our own Cuban members reading the names of enslaved people in worship, for knowing our own backyard. We give thanks for the whole congregation wrestling and owning this work, for naming the people, for finding descendants. We give thanks for deep partnerships, for knowing that integration without relationship is still segregation, for the internal and the external work. We give thanks for freedom, dreaming even with budgets, for collaborating with descendant communities. We give thanks for speaking and finding the names, for voting overwhelmingly to affirm true history and commitment to reparations. We give thanks for Belmont's version of continental breakfast. We give thanks for remembering that the story is not over and that we can together write a new ending. For repentance and acts of public truth-telling. We give thanks for seeing the work beyond spreadsheets and systems that had been tools of oppression, for connecting with organizations and historians, for all working together towards liberation. We give thanks for asking, what do we owe Anna Bowen? For spreading information, for history and consequences, for honoring and expanding and dreaming. We give thanks for affirming the worth and dignity of each and every person, for being truth seekers. We give thanks for the end of the beginning, for this lifelong and ongoing work, for advocating for reparative historical interpretations, for understanding who we are and our place in the world. We give thanks for reckoning the stories and all of our history. We give thanks for holding true to our public statements, for interrogating our history, for staying true to our commitments. We give thanks for making facts impossible to ignore, for becoming actively anti-racist, for moving at the speed of trust. We give thanks for being on the road to reparation and repair. Amen. Thanks so much for coming.